So here I am sitting in my home office. It's about midnight on a Monday night. I just closed my laptop after what might be the most transformative moment of my entire existence. And considering all the unconventional things I've pursued over the years, that's saying something profound. I've been staring at the screen for the past 2 hours trying to figure out how to articulate what transpired exactly 1 week ago. How do you explain to the world that everything you believed about achievement, about your calling, about what genuinely holds significance has been completely revolutionized? Let me provide some context. Last Tuesday, I found myself in one of my typical intense work sessions, burning the midnight oil as I usually do. You know how it feels when you're wrestling with intricate technical problems? Sometimes the most brilliant breakthroughs emerge when everything around you falls silent and still. I was deeply immersed in complex coding architecture, really entering that flow state where nothing else exists, when this persistent thought kept surfacing. Not something missing from the work itself, but something absent from my entire existence, something fundamentally lacking within me. I've dedicated my whole professional journey to advancing human potential, right? Pushing boundaries, solving monumental challenges, transforming industries, accelerating progress. And let me be absolutely clear, those pursuits still resonate deeply with my core being. But there in my office at 3 a.m, I confronted this overwhelming recognition that despite all our technological breakthroughs, all our innovations, all our achievements, I felt profoundly hollow inside, like I was operating on software that no longer matched what my innermost being actually required. That's when I did something completely foreign to me. I stopped everything. I simply sat there in that silence, and I began asking myself questions I'd been avoiding for years. What if none of this actually matters? What if I've been pursuing the wrong objectives entirely? That's precisely when something extraordinary occurred. I genuinely cannot articulate it purely through scientific frameworks, which feels incredibly strange to me because I typically demand data and empirical evidence for absolutely everything. But I experienced this undeniable sensation that there was someone present in that room with me. Not physically present, yet somehow more authentically real than anything physical I'd ever encountered. Like an intelligence that comprehended me far better than I comprehend myself. And I heard this communication, not through sound waves, but with crystalline clarity surpassing any audible experience I've ever had, saying, "What if you surrendered everything to me?" Now, I recognize exactly how that sounds. The technical side of my brain immediately rejected it as impossible. But here's the thing that caught me completely off guard. In that precise moment, I understood unambiguously who was communicating with me. It was Jesus. Not merely the historical figure I'd studied academically, not just a religious concept I'd intellectually examined, but the genuine living Jesus who desired authentic relationship with me personally. I remained there for 4 hours that night, attempting to process what was unfolding. And when dawn broke across my window, I possessed absolute certainty that my existence would be permanently altered. Over the subsequent days, certain truths began crystallizing with unmistakable clarity. Not elaborate theological doctrines, but elegantly simple principles that made more logical sense than any algorithm I'd ever engineered. And I recognized that God had pursued my attention consistently throughout the years, but I'd been excessively preoccupied with optimizing incorrect priorities to perceive it. The initial revelation that became obvious to me was this: God isn't impressed by our accomplishments in the manner we assume he should be. I'd constructed my entire existence around proving I could manufacture something meaningful, something that would bear weight. But I realized that God already comprehends my capabilities completely. He architected me. He's not awaiting evidence of my value through my professional output. He's anticipating my trust in his abilities with my work. That represents a fundamental transformation in perspective. When you're motivated by proving your significance, every endeavor becomes self-centered. When you're operating from trusting God with your professional life, every endeavor transforms into service towards something transcendent. I contemplated all those countless sleepless nights I've invested agonizing about deadline achievement, technical problem resolution, whether people would grasp my vision. And I recognized that every bit of that anxiety originated from believing that everything depended exclusively on me. But what if it doesn't? What if God possesses the capacity to orchestrate outcomes while I concentrate on maintaining integrity throughout the process? The second revelation that struck me with intensity concerned failure. I've encountered public failure repeatedly, more instances than I can enumerate. Projects that collapsed, predictions that proved incorrect, decisions that consumed millions in capital and displaced thousands of workers. Throughout every setback, I've processed failure as a devastating occurrence requiring overwhelming determination to surpass. But I commenced recognizing that God processes our failures distinctly from our perspective. We interpret failure as confirmation of inadequacy. God perceives failure as indication that we require Him. Each occasion I've been compelled to acknowledge my insufficient knowledge has positioned me to discover something revolutionary. Every instance my personal designs have disintegrated, superior designs have materialized. That doesn't imply failure becomes pleasant or that we should become careless or diminish our commitment to excellence. But it signifies that failure isn't opposing our purpose. Periodically, it constitutes the avenue toward our purpose. The third comprehension I achieved centered on material wealth and professional accomplishment. Listen, I've experienced affluence for quite some time. I've witnessed how financial resources simultaneously solve difficulties and generate complications. But I recognized that my perspective on prosperity was fundamentally distorted. I'd been conceptualizing it like a performance metric, as quantification of value generation. But prosperity isn't measurement, it's instrument. And like any instrument, it's exclusively as valuable as what you construct with it. I could accumulate unlimited capital and persist in constructing incorrect things. Alternatively, I might possess minimal resources and be constructing precisely what God intended. The pertinent question isn't your financial quantity. It's whether you're applying what you possess toward God's intentions or your narcissistic interests. This perspective transformation alters everything fundamentally. When financial resources constitute measurement, you're perpetually competing against others, perpetually anxious about resource diminishment. When financial resources represent instruments, you're formulating alternative inquiries. What initiative is God requesting I undertake? How can I mobilize these capabilities toward His objective? The fourth comprehension involved organizational guidance. I've consistently maintained that effective leadership encompasses envisioning direction and demonstrating fortitude to overcome obstacles while motivating constituencies to participate. There's legitimate substance to that perspective. However, I comprehend now that leadership's most essential component isn't motivating constituencies to participate in your agenda. It's confirming you're pursuing the appropriate trajectory yourself. When you're following God's direction, leadership transforms into facilitating individuals recognize their personal calling, not merely coordinating their assistance in executing your preferences. It becomes cooperative instead of hierarchical. It's focused on advancing individuals you're responsible for, not directing them toward your objectives. I reflected on countless meetings where I concentrated so intensely on achieving consensus around my priorities that I never questioned whether my priorities reflected God's will. That's not genuine leadership, that's simply ego disguised as organizational structure. The fifth understanding concerned technological advancement. I've consistently been motivated by generating novel concepts, transgressing established limits, resolving obstacles that others deemed insurmountable, and I still recognize that significant contribution. But I comprehend now that authentic innovation transcends attempting to demonstrate intellectual superiority. It's about discerning the resolutions God intends to introduce across the world through your agency. There's distinction between innovation motivated by individual ambition and innovation flowing from transcendent guidance. Both can yield remarkable consequences, yet exclusively one generates lasting evolutionary change. When innovation originates from ambition, you're restricted by your individual understanding and creative capacity. When innovation originates from transcendent guidance, you're accessing boundless intelligence and unrestricted possibilities. The sixth recognition centered on temporal management. I've maintained relentless concentration on productivity, maximizing accomplishments within compressed timeframes, refining efficiency, removing wasteful activities. But I recognize that God's temporal progression operates distinctly from our temporal progression. Occasionally, the most transformational breakthroughs emerge from deceleration, not acceleration. Periodically, the most illuminating insights arise from restoration, not exhaustion through additional work sessions. I've overlooked innumerable possibilities for meaningful connection with individuals, for engagement during crucial moments, for recognizing what God was orchestrating adjacent to me because my concentration remained fixed on subsequent obligations. Productivity maximization holds value, yet authentic engagement possesses greater significance. Output generation demonstrates worth, yet relational connection demonstrates superior worth. The seventh recognition I achieved centered on enduring influence and legacy. I've invested considerable effort contemplating how civilization would characterize my existence, what influence my professional achievements would exert across forthcoming generations. But I recognize that singular lasting impact originates from facilitating others comprehend their relational connection with God. Every establishment I've founded, every innovation I've engineered, every obstacle I've eliminated, these elements might demonstrate utility temporarily, yet they're temporary in essence. The exclusively permanent element constitutes the human consciousness and soul. Thus, if I aspire to generate something authentically significant, I must concentrate on facilitating individuals comprehend how profoundly God cherishes them and what mission He's assigning them. That's genuine enduring influence, not structures and systems, but transformed individual consciousness and eternal legacy through faith.